Thanks for listening to the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. 1 hour of tips from experts and real stories from people just like you. For those thinking about what lies ahead, for those going through the job search, and those who have paved the way to their next career after the military. These professionals are dedicated to helping you move forward successfully to the next phase of your career after the military. Welcome to Exchange.
And as we start our episode, our first segment is always somebody who is thinking about or in the process of transition away from service. Now, this guy, I've known him for about a year, and I've kept my eyeballs on him because not only is he a fellow podcaster, but he is a guy that has developed a concept that is from his Air National Guard time for the Air Force, and it's acknowledged to action. He's going to go into details for this too. But what I love about this guy is he's sat on both sides of the coin. He's been the receiver and the sort of helper in a way, and has really unique perspectives. I'm curious about his journey, and I'd like to introduce you to my guest today, Matt Benko. Hey, Matt, thanks so much for joining me today.
Cheryl, thank you so much for having me.
You and I have connected over the past year, and I have watched you take a concept and the art of what you wanted to do and just move forward in a beautiful way. So congratulations.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet. So let's get into a bit of the theory of acknowledge to action. Why don't you explain for our listeners really what that means, not just in the Air National Guard for the Air Force, but really what that means for you as a podcast host and for your guests?
I really look forward to talking about this because this has been years in the making as far as me thinking about it, processing it, and starting with the impactful word of acknowledge. And the word acknowledge comes from my Air Force experience as a career enlisted aviator. I am a C-130 Loadmaster in the Air Force Air National Guard component. And I've been doing that for about 14 years as a career enlisted aviator, Loadmaster. Prior to that, I was maintenance. When we're on an air crew and we're running operations and we're running checklists, it is the most critical, most important word. Every crew member, anytime we do something, executing a step or opening up a checklist, say before takeoff, after takeoff checklist, combat entry, all that. There's a lot of checklists we run. Every crew member has to say acknowledge. And it's a powerful word because it initiates what the steps as a crew, as a team, what we need to do as individual crew members, our responsibilities, and we move forward with the respective task. It's a powerful word. It's a powerful word in the aircraft. It is now a powerful word for me outside of the aircraft in my personal and professional life.
And by acknowledging something, you can then take action. That's how I have always understood it.
Yes.
And in taking responsibility as well. So if you acknowledge it publicly to your group or your crew or your squad or your battalion or whatever, you're acknowledging that it's either done or it's a problem. And then do you announce the action? I'm curious.
Well, yeah. So if we're talking operational wise, yes, it's acknowledge I'm dialed in. I verbally heard what the checklist is, and I'm going to proceed with my responsibility as a crew member. So it's a verbal statement. It shows that we could be in challenging situations where we're not like passed out in the back from any number of reasons, but it shows that physiologically, physically, mentally, emotionally, we're all dialed in. We absolutely acknowledge then allows us to proceed forward. That applies for our personal life too. We need to acknowledge when we're feeling overwhelmed or we're anticipating a challenge in our personal life with work, with any number of things. The power of acknowledge starts here, starts from within. And that is really the essence and the ethos of the Acknowledge to Action podcast, because you shouldn't take action or you shouldn't do anything until you have to acknowledge. You have to acknowledge that. And that could be applied to so many different avenues and aspects of our life. And with me being in the Air National Guard, going from active duty to, the traditional, 1 week a month, 2 weeks of the year that we're kind of like familiar with, I'm in a constant state of transition and adjustment. And it's so important for me to acknowledge that and be aware of that. So I could take good proactive action and just be with it, and keep it real with myself.
Now, you don't come out of the blue with this concept, because not only do you hear it when you're activated or even on your weekend drills, I'm sure you're doing some training in that plane, but you were also an adjustment counselor. Tell us a little bit about some of the jobs you've had as you've navigated the last several years in the Guard, and really how this plays into what you plan to do post-military.
Okay, that's a great question, because I've been reflecting on this a lot lately, and meeting myself where I'm at in life, as one could say. So I was active duty first prior to going into the Air National Guard. I did the 4 year enlistment to serve my enlistment, received an honorable discharge, and then I went to school. That was my first experience with readjustment. Becoming, I was a veteran. I was technically a veteran. Did my 4 years. I was active duty. I was a weapons loader, aircraft maintainer, and I was stationed in Alaska, Eielson Air Force Base for 3 years, and at Eglin Air Force Base was my final duty station during active duty. And I deployed twice during my time there. One to Saudi Arabia, one to Kuwait once, and that put me on a trajectory, on a path to kind of get a taste of what readjustment is, and just what I had to acknowledge and be aware of. And I got out when I was 20. I went in at a young age. I was 17. I actually turned 18 when I was in basic training. And I did my 4 years. So I was just barely 22 when I got out. I know I was barely 22. You still have a lot to figure out. Granted, I had some really cool life experiences in that short amount of time, but I still had a lot more to learn and figure out. I'm a proud community college graduate. Went to community college for 3+ years, transferred to a 4 year school, got my undergrad in philosophy. I was in the workforce for, give or take, 90 days. And I was working at a restaurant supply store at the time. And one of my coworkers, her son was in the Air National Guard. And he came in to say hi to his mother. We talked, and I found out he was in the Air Force Air National Guard at a unit at Willow Grove Air Reserve Station. And we were talking, and that's what kind of got the wheels turning to go back. And I didn't realize how much I missed it. And so that was my first conversation about Air Force, being in the military. He said to me, he goes, "Have you ever thought about going Guard?" That got me into Willow Grove Air Reserve Station. I got back to working on the A-10s as a 2W1 aircraft weapons loader. And I've been in ever since. That was back in 2007 when I got back in. I started working there full time as civil service employees. And in 2008, found my way to Afghanistan. There's a lot going on in 2008. Willow Grove went through BRAC, which is base realignment closure. So I knew coming home from Afghanistan, I was not coming home to a full-time job. Readjustment was banging on my door. Okay, you're going to deal with this, or readjustment's going to deal with you. I started a couple more years, got a couple notches on my belt. I started being a little more proactive. I applied for grad school, and within a couple months of getting back from Afghanistan, started my graduate degree in counselor education with a focus of student affairs and higher education. Did that. That was an amazing program, accredited program, allowed me to become a clinical counselor for the Department of Veterans Affairs as a readjustment counselor. I did that for 4 years. I left that position, and I was in 2016. That was a tough day for me to acknowledge what I needed to do. And I worked really hard to get there. I worked hard to get my master's degree. I worked hard. I was this close to getting my LPC, licensed professional counselor. And you need like 3,000 plus supervised hours and all these credentials. I met myself where I was at, and I resigned because I needed to deal with some things personally, emotionally, all that stuff. I met myself where I was at. I took ownership. I acknowledged. Fast forward to the podcast. What I missed about being a readjustment counselor was connecting with veterans, hearing their story. I did as a clinical counselor, as a readjustment counselor therapist, a big part of my job was establishing that rapport and to get a clinical baseline of what needed to be done and to meet the veteran where they're at. That part I missed. Those open-ended questions. What was your military service? What were some of the good highlights? What were some of the challenges? And so I took that model, and I obviously took away the clinical pieces to it, and I focused on turning it into. I did my own intake, if you will, for the podcast to just help individuals acknowledge their journey into the service, during the service, post service, or in process. That brings me to a good point. I talked about, when I'm in the aircraft and acknowledge, we open up a checklist. There's another critical thing we say. So if we're running a checklist, say after takeoffs or pre-slowdown checklist, right? As a loadmaster, sometimes there's a lot going on, depending on what we're doing airdrop wise. If the rest of the crew members have done their checklist part, the front enders, the pilots, the navigators, the flight engineers, but we're doing stuff in the back to get equipment and the stuff ready. We say in progress. In progress is very. I share that not because I love talking about. I love being a C-130 Loadmaster. It's awesome.
Yes, you do.
I'm a little bit
Yes,
biased.
you do.
I'm a little bit biased, but it is probably the coolest job you could have in the Air Force. And the C-130 is probably the coolest, the best fixed wing aircraft in all the DoD, whether it's Air Force, it's in all the branches of service. Really, it is. It's an amazing workhorse. It's really cool. So in
Hey Matt,
progress.
what's the name before you go to that? What's the name of the aircraft? Is it like something? There's a nickname for the C-130.
Oh, Hercules. Hercules.
That's it.
How cool is that too? I mean, I think the C-17 is called the Moose. Like, really? The Moose? Like Hercules or the Moose? Or that could be, and then there's this, I don't know what the C-5 is called. I'm bad with that because I'm just so dialed in with being a C-130 Hercules guy.
That's fine.
So,
That's fine.
but I share in progress, because that also is an applicable term that has influenced me, or a statement that has influenced me personally, professionally as well. In progress. And I've recently come to terms that readjustment is a long-term, if not a permanent state of being in progress. Like I'm readjusting in progress, and that's okay. In progress is a good thing. That means you're doing things. That means you're communicating. That means you're aware. Well, when you say in progress, it means you're aware. And so I use that in the podcast. I not only do my best to live by those words, but I also do my best to encourage that and help others kind of, understand it in their own way. Readjustment, acknowledge, and progress. And then I incorporate some more subtle psychological strategies to help individuals process that, process their in progress state of being. And that I've experienced that. I'm constantly trying to calibrate myself as that as well. So it's important to me to do that, because I'd feel like a phony baloney if I wasn't doing it, but here I was talking about it. But that's where those conversations manifest and kind of really come to life, because through that authentic, genuine, real talk. I always said, when I was a readjustment counselor, and I was in pursuit of becoming a licensed professional counselor, and I even considered getting a PsyD or a PhD. I was going to open up my own, talk therapy and just call it real talk. Just real talk, keeping it real. And so there's no this it's tough. There are barriers, and we have defense mechanisms in place to prevent us from maybe pursuing and getting the help we need when it comes to clinical sense. And I'm speaking that not only as somebody who's been on the receiving end of that, especially as of late, but also as a helper too. So sometimes that was the biggest challenging part, was establishing that rapport and getting through that initial hurdle, and hey, we're just talking here, so I'll go back to the podcast. That's what the podcast is. It's just to help individuals acknowledge where they're at, talk about their journey, and once you get some momentum, once you get the ball rolling, it's fun just to sit back and listen. It really is, and that's what I really appreciate and value about the podcast, because I'm able to tap into that source again without having to be like a clinical counselor. I'm doing it just the way Matt wants to do it, and not. I don't want this to come across as like on Matt's terms when it comes to podcasts. Like as far as like, hey, this is just I could do this as little or as often as I like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's more. I should say this is more appropriate. It's on the terms of the guest and what they want to talk about, as opposed to clinical protocol.
Right,
So
right.
that's what I mean by that.
Exactly. You don't have to fill out any forms. There's no insurance waivers.
Yeah,
There's like
exactly.
it's missing all that the muck that gets in the way of actually treating somebody. But you're not treating. You're just sharing. And you're a wonderful host. I just want to share that. I've known you a little under a year, and what I really appreciate about you. What I really appreciate about you is that you, during our conversations, even regarding podcasting, was you were taking very clear temperature checks. So you gave yourself time to think about things and let the ideas evolve and see if it fit. And I admired that because I'm not at all like that. I have an idea and a vision and we agree on a thing and we just barrel through it. That's been my MO for what am I, 57? So 110 years. It is just that's how I operate. And I think, on some level that's kind of fun, a little exhausting sometimes too. But you pause. And I think that when I listen to your podcast and I've learned from you just as a friend, acknowledgement really is acknowledging something and looking at whatever the issue is and then taking the action. It's not deciding your fate and just being all action. It's acknowledging, stopping, and action. So for you, I always called it, well, he's taking a temperature check. We might
Mm.
not move forward on this idea. And you were really chewing on the ideas before you committed to the action. And I so admire that. So thank you for teaching that to me. I don't know that I'll ever do it as well as you do, but I got to see that in action, buddy. And you really are, even though you might not realize it, you probably never thought you'd be Cheryl Cross's mentor, but you are because you were able to teach me that one thing. So thank you. Just by modeling
Well,
it. Just by modeling it.
I appreciate that, and thank you for those kind words, because that's really what it's all about. That helping somebody without even knowing you're doing it is, I don't think it gets better than that. When you're just yourself and you're just being your authentic self, and there's nothing to gain from it as far as like being in the moment. Like, hey, I'm just being me, and I'm just having a conversation, and when somebody could walk away from that feeling more empowered and more equipped, that's to me that's what it's all about. I think that's I can't speak for all podcasts, but I think I think most human beings want to be like that in their own way, how it works for them. Hey, this is what I bring to the table, this is my value, and if somebody's picking up what I'm putting down, great. If not, that's okay. I just that energy will be absorbed elsewhere in a more appropriate way. That's okay. So that's kind of what I was taking pause, for what you just said and how I just processed that, and thank you for sharing that. And
You modeled that very well. We couldn't have planned that better. That was not pre-scripted, you guys. And just for those of you who listen, a lot of people say, hey, what are the questions you're going to ask? And I said, I don't give you questions in advance because this is a conversation. I want this to evolve and just be as natural as possible. If I gave you questions, you'd be over prepared. And, with Matt,
yeah,
I've known Matt for a couple months now. I knew this would be easy peasy, even though we're halfway across the world from each other right now. I know people are going to want to check you out, not just the podcast, but maybe if you're available, connect with you. LinkedIn is my primary driver. spell your name, tell people how they can get a hold of you, and then we'll close the segment up with your last alibi.
Sure. So my last name is Benko, Matthew Benko. There's not too many of us out there, so I'm a relatively easy Google search. My website is acknowledge to, like the number two, action, acknowledge to action, and then that kind of links you and that provides some more context to what really acknowledge to action is about, adds a little more detail, has all the access to all the episodes to date. And I I'll say intentionally the word access is important to me too, because that's what it's about, having access to these sort of resources. So we could put tools in our toolbox to help us acknowledge, to help us with adjustment, readjustment, whatever transition, whatever we want to call it, whatever word that comes natural to us. We have to have access to these tools and these resources to meet ourselves where we're at in the moment. And that's, I'll kind of leave that. That's what Acknowledge to Action is all about. It's an access point for you to connect, engage, reach out. You could be a guest. You could listen to other great guests. It gets you connected into this network of resources that are only going to help you. So directly through Acknowledge to Action, with getting connected with your podcast, Cheryl, to so many others. That the power of the network is really incredible and powerful.
100%. And I just want to say openly, the amount of people that I've met through Matt, and just because we were communicating, and I don't know if this is the power of LinkedIn's algorithm, but it is, I've met some incredible people. In fact, I just talked to one yesterday. We were talking about you, and he's going to be a guest on the podcast too. So there's we joke that in this space of serving people, transitioning from the military or figuring out whatever their career path is, or getting to a good emotional state so they can move forward after the military. It's a small group of us, but it is a very tight group of us. And we're all very dedicated. I hate the word committed, but we're very dedicated to helping. And I love it. I wake up every morning incredibly infused with a purpose. And as a civilian who's not military affiliated, my father served well before I was born, I get to sit at the table with all these incredible people. So I just wanted to say thank you, Matt. You brought me into your circle. You've helped me without even realizing you're helping me. And being on the show is just, having you on the show is such an honor. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. Thank you for what you're doing too. This is an incredible access point, and you too have helped me too. When we connected a little less than a year ago, you gave me that fuel, that additional motivation that I needed in the moment, because I was like a pinball. I was all over the place, and I didn't want to end up right back where I started and trying to figure it out. So thank you, Cheryl. Sure.
You're doing a great job. Just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. All right. We're going to close up Matt Benko, Benko, Matt or Matthew on LinkedIn. Acknowledge to Action. You can find them. I think he's on all the big podcast platforms.
I am,
and,
yeah.
And also YouTube. Well,
yeah, it has its own YouTube channel, so I'm having fun learning that aspect.
Aren't we all? Aren't we all? All right, buddy. Have a great rest of your deployment. We will keep quiet where you're at, but I know you're doing incredible humanitarian work, and we'll be checking in with you as your career progresses, as your podcast progresses. I don't know when you separate from the military, but when you do, we're going to keep our eyeballs on you and continue to have conversations to see how you evolve. Sound like a deal?
Sounds like a deal, Cheryl. Thank you.
You betcha. All right, that was Matt Benko. My name is Cheryl Cross. You're listening to the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. We're going to take a very brief break, and then we're going to be back with somebody who is an expert. Stay tuned. The expert segment is something that breaks up all the stories, but sometimes we have experts who are also veterans, and that is the case today. I'd like to introduce you to someone who also sits in the talent management, executive coaching. He's giving back to the community for both non and for-profit with the veterancareerjourney.org. This is an interesting fella, and I really want to have him tell his story, but also how he's giving back to the veteran community through his books, through his speaking engagements and through this spectacular nonprofit. Please welcome Bill Kiefer. Hey, Bill, thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Cheryl. It's great to be here.
Thank you, sir. You and I spoke a while back. You were very interested in the podcast. We are swimming in the same swim lane.
Mhm.
Your whole purpose is to kind of close the gap between veterans and the employers, as is mine. And you're working heavily on both sides, which is super exciting. I'd love for you to tell us how you got to that and why you came to these conclusions that it's needed.
Oh, Cheryl, I appreciate that. And yeah, I'd love to share. I spent 12 years as an Army officer. And when I transitioned because my life journey and my career journey got crosswise. I went through a divorce. And I had three small kids. And I faced a life decision that influenced my career decisions. I was on a promotion list, and I resigned my commission while I was on the promotion list. I got out having very little idea what to do, what I wanted to do, how to do anything, and I struggled. I eventually got my feet up underneath me and had a great career as an HR and talent management senior leader in big companies. And then about 6 years ago, I had kind of a health event. I had a massive heart attack. I was doing, 70-hour corporate weeks for 22 years and traveling 33 countries around the globe, doing good work at a fast pace. And it caught up with me. When that happened, I thought, where am I going to go next? What am I going to do? I've made a good income. I think I was making an impact in the world, but I'm not 100% sure. And I thought, you know what? Actually, my wife brought it up. She goes, at this point of your life, do you want to make an income or do you want to make an impact? I thought, ooh, that's a really good question. But what I really want to do now, the income's pretty well taken care of. I was fairly conservative in my spend over the years, so we're in good shape. I thought, you know what? Maybe now's the time for me to make an impact on the world and give back a little bit. So I had to think about what that really meant. I thought, you know what? I want to make sure two things. One, no veteran goes through the same bad kind of transition I went through. And two, I don't want employers to miss out on great veteran talent simply because they're not familiar with what veteran talent looks like and what good it can do for their organizations.
So, for the folks listening, and I know a lot of them are either thinking about transitioning or have transitioned and maybe are having these experiences, what advice would you give to those folks who, let's say, let's go to the pre planners, those who are thinking about what they want to do? How might you work with those people, or do you?
I do, and I always like to say you can't cram for the transition exam. This takes time. So sometimes things happen to you, and you have to transition quickly. I get that, but by and large, everybody ought to be able to have a contingency plan for what life might look like after the uniform comes off. Now, where do you start? I always say you have to start with yourself. You got to understand who you are, what you're bringing to the party, and how you define success. Because at the end of the day, in career transition, there are different people and processes and tools and techniques. And it's a big, sometimes gray, muddly kind of world that's got a lot of things to learn. I believe and I found that if you start with yourself first, you can then start to see all those other things and understand them a bit more clearly. So, who are you? What do you bring into the party, good and bad? And how do you define success? What does good look like for your life and your career?
Let me stop you there. One of the things I'm hearing a lot from folks transitioning is the difficulty of going from the mission mindset to the personal mindset, from we to me. Talk about that.
Yeah, that's huge. At the end of the day, from day one in the military, you're taught it's all about the team. We're very self-deprecating. I didn't do anything. Well, guess what? Employers aren't hiring your entire team. They're hiring you. And if you can't articulate the value you brought, the results that you were able to generate in a way that causes the employer to understand, yes, Cheryl did this. Cheryl was responsible for that. Cheryl created. She may have done it with a team, but if you can't articulate that value add that you provided, it kind of sounds like you didn't provide it. And that causes often employers, interviewers, those folks in the hiring process to go, well, wait a minute. Did you not contribute? Are you trying to take the value others produced? I mean, what's the deal here? So you don't have the opportunity to interview everybody on your team, nor do we have the budget to hire them. So you got to be able to say, this is what I did. I did it with a team, all due respect to the team, but here's what I did. Because if you don't sing your own praises, nobody else is going to.
So, for those folks who are coming around the corner thinking that a job is just out there for them, what advice would you give them? I've seen these people as a recruiter. They've come around the bend, even the higher commissioned officers. What do you got? What do you want? Well, what do you got? Just get me a job. I'll do anything. And I think as a talent retention person, that's the worst thing that they can say. Because as you know, 60 to 70% of people are leaving their first job within their first year. And you know how expensive it is to hire and train and
Mm-hmm.
try and retain them. So speak to that a little bit from the employer side. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so one of the things I always coach veterans in career transition, and anybody, civilians too, when I'm coaching them, is if you come at me with, I'll do anything, my response is, I don't have anything for you. Whether I'm a hiring official or I'm a network connection, okay? See, employers don't have anything jobs. Jobs are open because specific business needs exist. And if I engage with a candidate, it's, well, I can do anything. That doesn't help me. I don't have time to draw your value against my need. How you answer what I'm asking for by you sharing it with me, not by me pulling it out of you. See, the job exists not to give you the job. The job exists because I have a need. At the end of the day, I believe employers, recruiters, folks in the employer side of the hiring equation, they're selfish people. Now, they're not bad people, but they're selfish. There's something they need to deliver, and they're going to go to the quickest, shortest route to get
Yep.
between here and there with the best result, the lowest cost. And so often, veterans don't military veterans don't quite seem to get that. So expanding on that a little bit, I guess I had conversations with folks that was like, well, it's an entitlement thing. Well, I served my country. I say thank you. So did I. What are you gonna do for me? It's just this entitlement, and I'm seeing less of it now than I did 3, 4, 5 years ago. But the world's different now than it was.
Yes.
So you got to get past yourself and focus on. I like to say you got to focus on it. What is it that the employer needs? What's the it, and how do you answer that it? You hear of people that have these delusions of grandeur about how they can do any job out there. Well, the fact of the matter is, maybe they could, but the probability is they couldn't do it right away. I was working with a fairly senior group of folks out of the special operations community, and the vast majority were retiring career folks. One of the gentlemen in the room was supremely confident, we'll say. He made a point. He said, Bill, I got a comment. I said, okay. He goes, anybody in this room could solve any business problem day one. I said, well, let me give you a real business problem. He goes, bring it on. So I said, you tell me how to commercialize a high-point gear for the Class 8 truck market in Brazil and get a 12% EBIT margin target in the next 12 months. He thought about it for a couple of minutes, and that was a real business problem that I had to work on at a company I was at in the past. And he sat there for a couple of minutes and he looked and he kind of smiled. He goes, okay, give me 2 days. So he had a sense of humor about it. But there's a difference between confidence and credibility. There's a difference between capability and credibility. And while I believe many of the members, most members of our armed forces, our service members that are looking at transition, our veterans that have already transitioned out, they're highly capable. That doesn't necessarily make them highly credible, because credibility is my perception of your capability to fit my needs. Was it 93% of the population never served in uniform? They don't know what your capabilities are, let alone do they find those unknowns. There's no way they can find those unknown capabilities credible in their world.
I always talk about when I teach salary negotiation, when you walk into a room or a conversation knowing what you want, that is a layer of confidence.
Mhm.
And it's also a humility because it's not braggadocious, it's what you need. And
Mhm.
just knowing what you need, you might not have to say it out loud, but knowing what location you want, what your salary is, what your BATNA is, what your walkaway point is, all those things, and negotiating from a stance of confidence. Now, people think, well, I have to be confident. No, you learn confidence through understanding what it is you need. And I
Mhm.
think that that's not really talked a lot about. And so people are like, well, yeah, I've sat in TAPS classes and it just drives me nuts, Bill. They'll say, just take whatever they give you. Well,
Mm-mm.
no, don't ever do that. Don't
Mm-mm.
ever, ever, ever take a job that just throws money at you, because I guarantee you, if you have not done your homework, you're going to be hit blindsided, and you're
Mhm.
going to start that job you loved 6 months ago. you're going to start hating it. Now, I worked in the defense industry, working with highly cleared CI polys, FS polys, people that were, leading the mission for my region.
Mhm.
And I believe, as a compensation and HR specialist, that we are putting people and our country at risk when we underpay these folks. So my battle cry has always been, and now these are contracts, right?
Mhm.
Contracts that are won and awarded to companies. Sometimes they're underbid to win
Mhm.
them. Now,
Mhm.
fortunately, I never worked for a company that did that. But I'm telling you that there are these heartbeat in seats type of roles where
Mhm.
people are being hired for their clearances. They may or may not be paid what they're worth or
Mhm.
what they feel. But I feel that a lot of these people are being put into these roles because they're not negotiating well. Tell me what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think negotiating well is necessary. And depending on the role, if you don't negotiate, they may not offer it to you. In the past, I've worked with folks that did purchasing, and if they couldn't negotiate, it made me question their ability to do the purchasing work because I want them to be able to negotiate. Are there people that are unaware of how to negotiate and unaware of their situation with the offer? Absolutely. Because again, they haven't been in the world, they don't know. So I like to tell folks they need to get out and understand and do some homework on their own. Go to those job sites and talk to folks that are in the recruiting world that will give them some real world numbers about what's realistic for a
Mm-hmm.
job range in a total compensation package, not just the base salary. At the end of the day, employers view salary and benefits and people costs as expenses. They are, and you want to keep expenses low. So, the good employers recognize that you pay low enough to be competitive for the very best talent. That doesn't mean you're going
Right.
to be paying the lowest in the industry. There are other folks that have different mentalities, the leading versus lagging mentality on compensation strategy and all that. So it's out there. And unfortunately, the tables are kind of stacked oftentimes where the employers, I mean, they've been doing this for a living for years, decades, maybe generations. They know what they're willing and able to pay, and they know how low they can go and still be attractive for what other reasons.
Yep.
Well, they're playing up against folks who have never played in that sandbox. That's part of what we're trying to do is help people, via veteran career journey and the other works I'm doing, help them understand the world they're getting into, the expectations, the norms, the typical kinds of things that they're going to face that may be very foreign to them given their military background.
For those of you listening, nobody expects you to understand this day one. Your SkillBridge internship or the day one of your job or your first job. We understand that this is a process. People walk into a room, you know their grade, you know their rank. This has probably been your world for many years.
Mhm.
But in the civilian workforce, negotiating is essential. And it's not just salary, it's leveraging your career in a way that is very different than what you've been accustomed to in the military. That takes training.
Mhm.
So, veteran career journey and organizations like that are out there to try and help. And really, this is a huge deficit. It's not just you, the person listening, it's many, which is why this is why I wrote a book, The 3 Year Guide for Military Professionals that are planning a civilian career. I wanted to get a hold of the people that realized they needed to plan. You
Mhm.
wouldn't just jump off your couch after sitting on it for 2 years and run a marathon. You'd die. It would hurt. And I think of the job world as this because I've seen so many of you cross the bridge from the military, coming into civilian or corporate world and being completely unaware. And as somebody working on the other side, I really wanted to investigate this. What are the issues? What are the problems? And so I'm thrilled to bring you people like Bill Kiefer. Hey, Bill, what else are we missing? I know you've gotten some books, you're doing
Mhm.
training, you're doing a
Mhm.
lot. I
Mhm.
love that you're continuing this impact. It sounds like you're busier than you were potentially when you were flying all over the world. But tell me how, first off, we want to know how people can get involved with you, get involved with the nonprofit, and probably, give us some websites or LinkedIn addresses, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to get hold of us, the Veteran Career Journey, is go to veterancareerjourney.org. We have a website up. It explains everything we do. If you're so inclined to donate, we have a ability to do that right on the website. If you prefer to talk to me directly, you can go to LinkedIn It's William E. Bill Kiefer on LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn. I'm on it every day, far too much. And I'll be real honest, you can give me a call. My phone number's on the website, so I might as well give it to you now. Anybody who really wants to talk, it's 419-205-7072. But I'll suggest the most efficient way to do it is veterancareerjourney.org.
What do you offer for folks coming out of the military or veterans? What type of training does VCJ offer?
Yeah, so the training that we're designing and building and delivering is based on the two books. The first book, Military Career Transition: Insights from the Employer Desk, I view that as, I call it intelligence preparation of the career battlefield, to help you get an idea of how to get prepared and how to get known. The second book, Veteran Career Journey: More Insights, is a follow-on to it that says, once I've landed, what do I do?
Yeah.
We use the metaphor of a parachute jump. You prepare for the jump, you make sure the aircraft's good, you train, do all this. That's this book. And then you jump. And once you land, you got to do something at the landing zone. This
Right.
book helps you figure out what to do at the landing zone. How do you land well, identify the who's and the what's? How do you integrate well to really learn about the people and processes and tools and techniques? And then over time, how do you leverage everything you've learned to thrive and survive in the long run? So that's the contents, themes, and stuff of the training.
Why don't we close this segment with any last alibi that you have for our listener?
Everybody that wears a uniform today knows it's going to come off at some point in the future. It may be a long time in the future with a plan, or it may be unexpectedly for whatever reasons. But I can say you can't start early enough to start considering what you want to do when that uniform comes off. And the sooner you start, the more likely it is you'll be successful when that day comes.
Thank you so much, Bill. We appreciate you being on the show.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate the opportunity.
You betcha. My name is Cheryl Cross. You're listening to the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. We'll be right back after this very brief break.
Did you know that each year, more than 200,000 service members leave the U.S. military to find new careers? If you or someone you know is planning to leave service, our host, Cheryl Cross, has taken her 20 years of HR experience and written an essential guidebook for people just like you. It's called Civilian Mission, the 3-year guide for military professionals planning civilian careers, and it's available online at Amazon and other major retailers. Civilian Mission is packed with essential information to help you ease the gap between military service and your next exciting career after the military. Before we get back to the show, we want to say thanks for listening to the podcast. We appreciate your support. Now, back to the show.
As we head into the third segment of our episode today, I am honored to bring you somebody that not only have I followed, but I listen to his podcast, and I have to tell you, every time I turn on LinkedIn, this guy's posts are at the very top. So LinkedIn's algorithm knows that I really admire the work of this guy. I'd like you to meet Kevin Seif, and Kevin is a co-producer of Harder Not Smarter Pod. He is also co-producer of the company Vet Collective. I'm going to pause now and let him introduce himself because he's got a great story. Welcome to the show, Kevin. Thanks. How's it feel to be in the passenger seat instead of the driver's seat of a podcast?
Feels a little weird, but I've been doing it enough now that you just get used to swapping roles. It actually makes it a little bit easier. I don't have to worry about figuring out the next question.
Well, I have a ton of questions for you. Obviously, you've been out now 4 years as of this recording. You guys are killing it for what you're doing. I know, just being an entrepreneur myself, how hard it is. What brought you from not one, but 2 service branches, serving time in the military, to where you are now? Can you lay it out for us?
Yeah, my career was a whole bunch of second tries, I guess you can say. Went to the Naval Academy, but it actually took me 2 tries to get in there. I wanted to go SEALs from there, and it was just a super competitive year, 2008. So I think there was 90-something guys that put it as their first choice. I unfortunately didn't get it. Fortunately, looking back in hindsight, I went Marines instead and did that for 4 years. From there, I was trying to go both MARSOC and SEALs just to get into that community. And the SEAL opportunity presented itself first, but again, on the second application, it took me 2 years to make that one happen. And then even in SEAL training, I got to do Hell Week twice. I'm one of those lucky few. I got swimmer-induced pulmonary edema, SIPE. So I got to do Hell Week, I guess, a total of 1.5 times. I made it to Wednesday night the first time, and then got rolled out of class. By Monday the next week, so 5 days later, I was in another class. I'm not sitting around waiting to class up again. I'm going to do this right away. And then, made it through in 2012 and served with the SEAL teams for 8 years, a total of 12 years service.
And you've had a chance to meet quite a few people that we honor here. John McCaskill was a guest on your show. Mark Devine, who helped us with the Robert Hamilton Owens, his documentary and his feature that we did. Steve Brown, who you've not met, from Camp Brown Bear. Seems to be a SEAL community that we've kind of created, but I like that you are both dual Marine and Navy. How has that propelled you through this very challenging thing that you're doing to inspire others to be veteranpreneurs?
Honestly, it's been more following something that I'm enjoying. Since leaving the military, I didn't know what I wanted to do at the beginning. I also got out 2 weeks before COVID. Literally, I got out February 29th, and March 13th was when California shut everything down. I remember that because we were trying to go surfing that day, and they said you can't go to the beach. Right. And so as I'm trying to figure out and navigate transition, I'm also navigating this whole new weird thing. My original job offer got rescinded. They eventually came back and offered it again, but they didn't know what was going to be going on. And they didn't want to hire me just to immediately fire me, so they held off on that. I found something that might have been a good fit, but I'm trying it out. I'm not sure. And then I eventually left that company after about 10 months with the intent to start my own firm. And that sent me down a whole new path. And that was more an opportunistic situation. So I was working as a recruiter within the life science space. And I realized what they do really isn't that complicated. And I can reproduce that myself. I don't need to be giving up 75% of my commission to be working with a group of people that, maybe I do or don't align with how they want to run business. And the service industry is a great opportunity to get into because it's super low barrier to entry. You don't have to have a product. You don't have to have warehousing or shipping. It really cuts down on the total overhead. As a recruiter, all I needed was internet and a couple software subscriptions. And then, just having organizational skills, communication skills, work ethic, time management, anything that you have in the military, you can reapply to a service industry. And so we went into the new year when my commission was going to reset. All my deals had closed from the year before, so I was going to either be starting over with a baseline commission, or I can just leave and start my own company and make 4 times as much for every deal, or work 1/4 of the amount of time and make the same amount of money. And so I was like, I can give this a try. Worst case scenario, I go back and get another job someplace, but I might as well see how this goes and see how I like it. And what I found out, while recruiting was fine, I enjoyed it for what it was. It gave me the opportunity to learn about entrepreneurship. What I really enjoyed was actually just building a business and working through all those problems and having that creative mindset. And so I wanted to be able to share that with other veterans who may or may not have known that this is an accessible opportunity. And so I started putting information out on LinkedIn. Like, hey, this is what I did. This is how I started the business in literally a span of a week. These are the steps I went through. These are the things you should consider. These were some of my mistakes, my missteps, my success. And it hit a massive nerve on LinkedIn. I went from, a casual 3,500 followers, I think, connections on LinkedIn, most of which were through the recruiting space. So a lot of life science scientists and tech people. And in the span of a year, I went from 3,500 to 27,000 followers, skyrocketed from like 100,000 maybe impressions for the year to 6 million. And this wasn't me putting out some profound information. It was more of just putting information out there that largely wasn't being presented to the veteran community. So much of the organizations out there are, let's get you a job. Let's teach you how to write a resume. Let's teach you how to interview. Maybe let's give you some skills to land a job outside your wheelhouse. But there's not a lot in the way of teaching veterans about entrepreneurship.
Are the people that you're meeting through your outreach and your podcast and the people that you are coaching, are they who you thought, or has that changed since you've started it?
It's still a work in progress. I'm not totally sure what it's going to end up being, but it started out as me putting information out there. And then I was like, all right, maybe I can I can turn this into a coaching business to actually give people hands-on criticism and ideas on how to streamline what they have going on. And then from that, I started putting out a newsletter. Like, let me condense all these things that I've been putting out into segmented articles. And then from that, I realized that there's a larger audience out there that wants to be able to communicate with one another. They don't want to just have one-on-one meetings with me or receive a newsletter from me. They want to actually interact with other veterans who are in the entrepreneurship space. So we started the Vet Collective community. And then through the newsletters, we were interviewing veterans who were entrepreneurs already. So we're like, all right, let's just take those interviews and turn them into a podcast. We're already recording it anyway to go back for article notes. So let's just increase the production value a little bit, turn it into an enjoyable format that is beyond just pulling information to put into an article. So then the podcast kind of grew out of that. And then because people keep asking, how do we get the broad reach? How do we get more customers? How do we improve our brand based off of what you guys have done? We just launched our marketing and branding agency, H&S Media, which just goes back to the Harder Not Smarter podcast. And now it's just H&S. And we actually just applied or filed our LLC, putting everything all under one roof. So we have H&S Media, which has the podcast, which has the community, which has the newsletter, and has the marketing and branding agency. And so it's just a growing thing that we have a lot of freedom and maneuverability with. But it really comes down to doing the things that we enjoy that provide the most value to the veteran community to learn about entrepreneurship.
What I like about what's happening, and I hear, is that you're really riding a wave of success and you're adding to your business per need. So obviously, you didn't think you'd probably do a marketing arm a year or so ago, but the need presented itself. And what I love about the veteran community, especially you special operators, you can make something out of nothing, and you can do it very quickly. And I think that's one of the values anybody serving in the military. I don't care if you're an HR specialist. You have to think on your feet. As a civilian sitting on the workforce development side or the recruiting side, I'm here barking to the businesses saying, this is a workforce that is very fungible. They're flexible, they're resilient, and you need to be able to accept that and understand that this is the environment that they're working in. So it makes sense that there would be a ton of vetrepreneurs, entrepreneurs with the veteran tag in touch. I want to ask you a question. I love the term harder, not smarter. Where did you get that saying for your show, Harder, Not Smarter?
That was just good old fun and banter in the group. So Greg Van Dyne, my co-host, he's a former Green Beret. So you have a Marine and Navy SEAL on one side and a Green Beret on the other. But we both got out into the recruiting space. And then we decided to open our own recruiting agency. And then we started talking about entrepreneurship. And we just met on LinkedIn with a lot of similarities in what we're doing. Like, why are we doubling the effort when we combine forces? We have different outlooks and different experiences that gives us different perspectives when we approach the business. And it helps a lot with the podcast because now it's not just, two team guys talking about whatever. It's his perspective of going up the enlisted side, being in the Army, going to a top tier MBA, and then finishing where he is versus me being an officer, being both Marine and a SEAL, and then the things that I bring to the table. And so it gives us a lot of different perspective on a topic when we're interviewing people. And so we were just going back and forth when we finally had the idea to launch the podcast, and we started throwing different ideas out there. We're jumping on ChatGPT, having it come up with some funny ideas. We're like, we want to have something that is lighthearted, but gives a head nod to the veteran space, but also entrepreneurship. And it was sending out some hilarious things like commando conversations.
I know,
and
right?
I remember some of the commando conversations always sticks with me because it was just so outrageous. But we were just shooting back and forth on text message. And I don't remember which of us actually suggested it, but as a joke, we said, let's just call it Harder, Not Smarter, because we're doing everything the hard way when we had no entrepreneurial experience. We had no formal training in starting a business. We just figured it out. And it all really came down to make a bunch of mistakes and learn from them, as opposed to try and come up with the perfect plan that maybe you'll execute down the road. And that's one of the things that we always talked about in the Marine Corps is be comfortable with a 70% plan. In my first SEAL platoon, we used to always say, don't worry, it'll buff out. We'll figure it out when we get on the ground. You can only analyze stuff for so long before you're just splitting hairs and you don't actually know the ground truth.
What are some of the crazy creative ideas that some of your clients have come up with that maybe you've seen come to fruition, if you can talk?
To talk about the whole entrepreneurship experience across the board, we actually break it down into 3 different areas. We call it the 3 Bs. You have borrow, build, and buy. Borrow is what you were just talking about with the franchise option. You're essentially taking that business model and just opening it in a new location. They're already giving you the playbook, which is actually really good for a lot of military people. If they don't have that creative mindset, the new idea to run a business, they don't necessarily want to make sure there's product market fit and come up with the sales and the marketing. Franchising is great because it gives you a set of rules and a checklist to follow, and you already can go back and see their business model is successful. You can see the hundreds or thousands of different locations they have. You can see the revenue that's coming in. You can see all the details that get broken down for you, assuming you're going to a good franchise, and that usually comes down to working with a good franchise broker. So it's great for procedural people. The military, you do this all the time. You fall in on a new unit, you fall in on a new location, a new fob, and you don't necessarily need to create it from the ground up, but you want to make it better. You want to improve upon it. You want to follow things and learn from it and worry about the functional aspect, not all the logistical stuff. You have other people that can handle those things. And so the franchise option can be really good for certain personality types. And then there's the build option, which is the traditional entrepreneurship route. You come up with an idea and you turn it into a business from scratch. But what a lot of people don't understand is most businesses are not startups. And I use the term startup in the sense of what it's kind of become today, the tech space, the life science, the pharmaceutical thing like that, where you're working out of your parents' garage and you're coming up with some new software platform or new app or whatever it is, and you're trying to get venture capital funding. Most businesses do not fall under the venture capital business model. I think it's like 3% of businesses actually meet the criteria of what a venture capital investment looks like. And that's not saying that they invest in 3% of companies. That's 3% of companies meet the criteria, period. And then they have to prove that they're a good investment on a whole bunch of other things. So going into the build mentality, knowing that you can recreate something that already exists, and that's perfectly okay. Coming up with a new plumbing business, an HVAC business, a pressure washing business, a car wash business, a construction company. Every one of those has tried and true methods and plays, like a playbook that you can follow that works. Just find a successful plumbing company, find a successful electrician, find a successful actor, and replicate what they're doing. It's not rocket science. It just comes down to having the wherewithal to know where to look, how to come up with problem solving, having the risk tolerance, because obviously there is risk associated with it, and then being able to wear multiple hats, which most service members already do. And so I really don't deal with a whole lot of crazy ideas. It's more of working with people trying to build a business from scratch that don't know where to begin. And that's why I created the business launch guide that I did. And that starts literally from the ideation phase of let's brainstorm some ideas. What are you good at? And what do you enjoy doing are the 2 areas I start at. If you're really good at swinging a hammer and you get enjoyment out of building things, let's go down the contractor route. There's definitely money involved. There's a ton of people looking to get houses built, getting renovations done, whatever it is. So there's absolutely a market for it. Now that you have this idea, let's go through the checklist of getting a business stood up. And regardless of whether you're doing a construction company, a plumbing company, you're starting a gym, the foundational levels of starting a business are going to be the same. You need to file for some level of incorporation to protect your personal assets from the business operations. Whether you go for a incorporation, whether you go for an LLC, whether you go for a partnership, and then on the tax side, you're doing an S corp or a C corp. And I can go into all those I do go into all those on the guide, so there's no reason to beat the dead horse here. But setting up the business structure and then getting the bank accounts and then having the business plan and actually knowing who your target audience is and how you're going to communicate with them. All those things go into getting the business up and running, and it doesn't matter what it is you're doing. So having that framework to start really helps. And the third option, the buy option, is the the trending topic you're seeing today. 10 years ago, it was real estate. People wanted to invest in real estate because there's huge margins with it. Now that the real estate market's flatlined a little bit, everyone's getting into buying businesses because everyone's talking about the boomer generation that's retiring and the huge wealth transfer that's bound to happen because all these boomers that own businesses that don't have succession plans, they don't have kids that want to buy it or that are going to take it over. They don't have a second in command that's going to buy it out from them. And so they're looking to sell fully functional operating businesses. But it really comes down to knowing how to look for them, knowing what a good business looks like. And that's where having a business broker really helps. And we partner with both franchise brokers and business brokers to help people that want to go down one of those paths find good deals and good businesses to work with.
I live in the great state of Hawaii. The average age of a farmer here in Hawaii is 60 years old. So
it's the same thing with a lot of the trades. I think the average age of a plumber is 45. And so a lot of whether you get into a business or not, just getting into the trades is going to be very lucrative for a lot of people because they're just being neglected. If you have a flood in your house, you have to call a restoration company. If you have a water heater breaks, you have to call a plumber. If you have electrical shortages, you have to call an electrician. And so getting into the trades is going to be very lucrative, and then learning now how to do this stuff so that you can start your own business from that is even better.
And there's a ton of skilling and reskilling programs that are available through WIOA, Wagner, Pizer. States are funded for these things. So wherever you are, check in and see what type of skilling programs you can look at. A lot of grants, a lot of funded programs. I know people are going to want to get a hold of you. And I know you're going to say LinkedIn, but your name is unusual, and there's a lot of people just with ear pods in their ears. Spell it for us. Tell us how they can find you.
It's Kevin Seiff. SEIFF for all you military people. It's Sierra Echo India Fox. Collective.vet is the website, and that has everything from our podcast to our newsletter to H&S Media, our marketing company. We're just shy of 100 members right now, so it's a quickly growing community of veterans interested in entrepreneurship, and it's unique in the sense that a lot of veterans come into that group with previous issues or trauma or just a lack of community, and they want to be able to interact with people that are like them. And we do monthly webinars, we have digital content, we have guides, we have chat forums where we answer questions, we make introductions with lenders and investors and stuff like that. So there's a whole bunch of things that happen, but a lot of people come there just because they want to interact with other veteran entrepreneurs.
And you're across the board military affiliated, active service members thinking of transitioning, preparing, which is the theme of my show, preparing in advance to support my book, The 3-Year Guide, Civilian Mission. Also people who are family dependents or veteran connected. Could they be military affiliated?
Yes, we have military spouses on there. We have first responders.
Great.
We keep it pretty broad. We're not using ID me or anything like that to verify anybody because we're not talking anything sensitive. But we like to have that veteran feel. We tell people that aren't veterans, if they do want to join, just be respectful of the veterans who are there because they're the priority. But across business, it doesn't matter if you're a veteran or not. It's good to have a broad range of experiences and perspectives.
Thank you so much. What's your last alibi? What would you like to leave the audience with today?
Move forward with trying something that scares you. I got into business because it was a weird circumstance with events. I got COVID. I was ending my commission structure for the year. And so I just took a leave. I'm like, I can figure this out. I'll give it 6 months and see how it goes. I can always go get another job. If you have the inclination to be a business owner at some point, give it a try. Even if you're just starting something on the side, you can build something in your free time. You don't have to go all in all at once. You don't have to take out hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in loans. There's ways, like Mike Clemmer, he started aerial resupply with $500.
Yep.
He built it on the side while having another job, and he got to the point where he was making enough money to go full time with it. That's a perfect example of what you can do. Just give it a try. Earning your first dollar is a remarkable feeling when you realize what is possible out there. And so I can't emphasize enough that if you have any desire to be a business owner at some point, just give it a try. Start something on the side and see how it goes.
And don't do this alone.
Do not do it alone. There's no reason.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, this is another great segment for a wonderful episode. Check out the guys at the Vet Collective. Tune into their Harder Not Smarter podcast. Kevin, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
You betcha. I'm Cheryl Cross. You're listening to the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. Going to take a brief break and come back with somebody who's been out of the military at least 5 years. We'll see if they've figured it all out. We'll be right back.
If you or someone you know would like to be featured on the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour podcast, write to us at the letter X, changepodcast.com. That's xchangepodcast.com. Thank you again for your support. Now, let's get back to the show.
As we wrap up the last segment of this episode, I'm pleased to bring you somebody that I found through my Outlier group, which is a great membership program that I've been involved in this last few months. I'd like to introduce you to a retired and now veteran. She's got so many things on her docket that I can't even, well, there's just so many. Author, entrepreneur. She is mission specific with her business, and she's going to tell us all about her transition. Please welcome to the show, Irene Glazer. Hi, Irene. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, it's a real honor and a privilege. And I was just so excited to meet you a couple of weeks ago through the Outlier program and learn all about what you're doing to help our nation's heroes. There aren't enough people like you, so I'm wondering if we could make you in a dozen other places. And that's the beauty of having podcasts, is the broad audience you can reach. But people like me who have been through that journey a dozen times over are just so grateful for people like you who continue to play it forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I just got goosebumps. I love what I do. And as I just told some folks, I wake up every morning excited to talk to people. I think stories are important. Transition stories aren't talked about enough because everybody has a very unique one. And hopefully the challenges that are brought up will be done. Somebody will do something with it. It might be me. It might be you. It might encourage someone who's listening. So thank you. I appreciate it. I'm excited to hear your journey and share your journey over the last several years. Tell us when you left the military and how that process was for you.
Okay, so I started the Army as a private, and I had a very long and sometimes torturous journey that landed me ultimately in the Pentagon as a full colonel. There's like this slow drum roll when you know the end is coming, and you go through all these physical symptoms like shaking and dry mouth. But the truth is, you don't know what you don't know, even if you think you do. And there's a fear factor of leaving. A lot of people who leave the military, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, and I say that because people retire and they don't necessarily want to retire and they're not necessarily ready to retire. But it can be terrifying because you're going from a community that is almost closed in the level of camaraderie and the experiences you share together, which are so unique. Having lived all over the globe, having been in combat, having just shared in the joys and the sorrows, and knowing that whatever is out there isn't going to look like that, isn't going to be like that. What do I need to do now to prepare myself and to adapt? So I retired in 2014 out of the Pentagon, and I thought I was really prepared. I'd been working on my LinkedIn profile and my resume for a whole year. Nobody wanted to look at it because I was still in the Army. So I knew I can't even apply for things till I'm out. And then I'm like, what am I going to do? I won't be employed while I'm applying for things, and all this negative self-talk. And I just got out a lot. I talked to a lot of veterans over the last year. Obviously, it's been 10. And they say, this transition program didn't prepare me for anything. And I don't mean to badmouth it. It's come a long way. I remember when I went through it, we got a little class on LinkedIn. We got some websites where we can look for jobs and a couple other tools. And they meant well. but you still come off feeling like you've been jettisoned off a speeding train. Wake yourself up in the ditch, trying to figure out what's next. And it sounds negative, Cheryl, but there's so many wonderful things you can do at that point in your life.
Have choice, right? At what point did you realize, oh gosh, I have a lot of choices here? This is the theme I hear consistently over and over again.
Yeah, I think depending on your experience and what you've been through, that transition may be a lot harder. And in some ways, there are veterans that never really make it and they go dark and they have mental health and there's resources for that too. And then there's other veterans who immediately jump into a game that looks a lot like the game they just left, whether it's instruction or contracting, doing the same thing they did when they were in the military, or government jobs that look the same. But there's a whole world out there of volunteerism and community service that I don't know that's first thing people think of, because everyone's worried about making money, and I understand that. But it is precisely that gave me the skill sets to be very successful outside of the military. It was precisely my interest in helping other people, whatever that looked like, that came back to me, both in employment and also in just self-worth and satisfaction. And it's understated, in my opinion, the value of volunteering and helping others like you so that they don't feel so alone.
So you continued the mission in a different way. Tell us how you got from jettisoned off a speeding train to where you are now, if you can.
Well, I love this term shotgun effect, where you just throw stuff everywhere and see what sticks. It's not a strategy. I guess it's a strategy because it isn't a strategy, so that's a strategy too. But I did some volunteer work. I applied for a jillion jobs. Things weren't happening quickly enough, so believe it or not, I took a position in Africa for 4 months, helping out with UN peacekeeping troops. And I had to do it in my original native language, which I've all but lost, which is French. And I guess I tell you that story because I threw myself completely out of any comfort zone I might have had. And it was the experience of a lifetime. But these little contract positions in other countries, teaching the skills that you learned in the military, are out there. There's so much out there that the best thing you can do is start building your networks based on your older networks. Like, ask people, hey, I'm looking for work and I like doing this way, this or that. And the more people you tell, the better. I landed first in Africa, followed by steady government employment, which used my skill sets but was not fulfilling, followed by something that was very fulfilling, which was I got paid to be an executive leader in the largest federal agency that oversees a program that provides jobs for people who are blind and have significant disabilities. And that tapped into helping, giving back, only I got paid good money. And during COVID, I made another choice. I became an entrepreneur because the reality of my job was 12 hours a day in front of Zoom meetings, and there was no end in sight of that. And I was gaining the COVID-19 and not feeling good. So I figured entrepreneurship would be a great way to control my life, get my life back, be my own boss, which I'd never been in my entire life. Started working when I was 15 somehow, and get out there and have a lot more flexibility in what I wanted to do with my time. And a lot of that continues to be giving back.
You wrote a book.
I did.
Choose Your Battles. Is the book about what you experienced in the military, your post-military life, or is it both?
So how I got there was a little complicated. I had always wanted to get my stories down for me and for my family. I had had some incredibly unique experiences, have been in Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait. Before that, South Korea, Australia, and before that, Cold War Germany, where one of my stories is I got thrown on the night train through East Berlin into East Germany to get to Berlin, where I actually went behind the Berlin Wall and viewed Russian Soviet occupied communism up front. These are stories that will die with me. So I wrote a book to get the stories out. But while I was writing, I learned a lot about, I want this to be entertaining. And I just infused as much humor as I possibly could. One day in leadership training, they made me the first sergeant for the day. It was a day before I had to stand before my whole company. And guess what we were going to do that day? Drown proofing. I had to stand before my company of males in a bathing suit. And this is the kind of thing that happened in the 80s to me all the time and into the 90s. We had some huge scandals in the military. One was called Tailhook for your older audiences. And we women, we survived all of these things. So another reason I wrote the book was to let other women know that they're not alone in their unique journey as being females in this 90% male environment. And I just kind of learned that other people were enjoying the book as well, because at the end of every short vignette, it's very readable. There's a little lesson that I might have learned, and some of them are a little catchy. So, for example, in that bathing suit example, my lesson is if you have to stand out, stand tall, me being short. But it was true. I just threw my shoulders back. Okay, is this what you guys are going to do to me? Dare one of you to make a sound right now. So it's about resilience. It's about hope. It's about things always get better if you believe they will. And the great stuff that I got out of the military that apply to really all lives, the fellowship and how it can lift you out of wherever you are. So that's a lot about this book. But it mainly is, it's entirely about my military journey. And there were so many things I left out. But the publisher was starting to get annoyed with me, so I had to quit after a lengthy period of time writing. And I really think there'll be more books in the future.
What are you going to focus on book-wise?
I think the next time I want to tell other people's stories.
Oh, I like it. This is what I'm doing. I like your style. Okay. I look forward to that one because I like to hear you're such a good conversationalist and you ask great questions. When you and I spoke originally, I felt very energized after I spoke with you. So I know that you're going to do that with whoever you choose for your next book. Good luck. Do you have a title in mind? Do you have any idea?
Choose their battles. But I mean, I'd love to say choose her battles, but I have, if you were to look on Amazon right now, my reviews were so many males that loved this book that I had to start asking females to just write something. So I can't, I actually was approached by a number of my Black and brown colleagues that told me I went through something exactly like this, and I'm so glad you wrote this. So I want to go back to these folks who were the only ones in the room like I was. I did not go into a female traditional career. I was a military police officer when these women were just being accepted into the military police corps, and then you top that with now I was in law enforcement too, so I'm guilty, but you top that with an alpha person mentality. In that case was all alpha males. And I learned even from a retired general I spoke to yesterday that women were not welcome. And that was the welcome I got in the military. So I love to share because we can overcome all of this. And we can make ourselves somebody that people want to work with, and people want to have working for them, and people want to work for. And I made a lifetime out of doing that as a survival tactic, but it's carried me over, and it works, Cheryl. It gives me energy. Oh, I give other people energy.
I like that you talked about survival techniques. How are survival techniques showing up for you as a CEO, as a vetrepreneur, as someone who owns her own business?
It's funny you ask, or maybe it's not funny, but you've been in government contracting. This world is still predominantly male. I am in federal contracting. I own a business called SPAR, SPAHR Solutions Group. We're an IT business, and part of that was selfish. The government spends more on healthcare and IT than anything else, unless I have that wrong. I'm pretty sure that's true. And so there's opportunities galore. When I attend small business forums put on by the Small Business Administration or industry days or the groups that I love, such as the Institute for Veterans and Military Families out of Syracuse, one of my favorites, on the board for the National Veteran Small Business Coalition. I have this big federal contracting military entrepreneur ecosystem, or there are a couple of ecosystems there. We are still predominantly male, and I don't say that with anger, frustration, or bitterness. It's just a fact. And there's a lot of programs elevating women today. They're out there. IVMF, I have a little dyslexia, does that a lot, and so does the board I'm on. They're a huge and fast-growing program for veterans in GovCon, specifically government contracting. But I look around the room and the women owners, CEOs, are not a significant number of entrepreneurs who are veterans. And that's why I love to encourage that. I'm there to encourage all demographics, but I am a woman-owned business as well as a service-disabled veteran-owned business. So I sort of focus on those two groups to try to recruit and let other females and service-disabled veterans know that we can all do this. And there are lots of resources out there for us.
Are you one of them? Are you willing to mentor someone through this process, or at least have a
I'm so easy to find on. I'm sorry, I just cut you off, but I just wanted to jump out of my chair. I have helped people I've never met who reached out on LinkedIn with their resume. I have connected people I've never met with someone who I know who might help them. But there's a group of people like you and me that are connectors. Yeah. And we get energy from finding a need in one person and finding somebody else who wants and does address needs like that for a win-win. And I get a lot of joy and pleasure out of doing that. So I have some skill sets. Don't ever ask me to do a pivot table. I even run scared when I see a spreadsheet, not the best CEO quality, but that's why you have good people. Yes. But I'm an amazing writer, editor, and I parlay that into helping people write their resumes, tell their story. In the government, I used to get stuck writing awards that other people signed off on. It wasn't fair. I'm writing it. You're pretending it's yours, but I did that, and I did that in the military. I just became a better writer for it. I use that to help people. So the answer to that is I'm very busy on LinkedIn. Anybody can connect with me, reach out to me, time permitting, because sometimes I do overcommit a little bit. I will help them, even just talk to them.
There's a really interesting way that Irene spells her last name. And she didn't do this on purpose, I'm pretty sure. But it's Glaeser. So if you're listening on earpods only, Irene Glaeser.
I am the only Irene Glaeser on LinkedIn, I think. I haven't Googled myself in a moment, but it makes me easy to find. And there's that long Lithuanian name in the middle there that begins with a V.
What's going on for you in the next 5 years? You seem to be a very live in the moment, live in the present. You've got lots going on. Have you calculated what the next 1, 2, 3, 5 years look like?
Oh boy. Well, the company's doing great. We just formed a joint venture under the Small Business Administration's Mentor Protege program. That's easily looked up, and it is a great way to launch a business, a joint venture with a larger company that kind of scoops you up, teaches you things, provides resources, and at the same time, they are gaining your socioeconomic categories. So when a company gets too big, if they want to compete for small stuff, like the VA, which really focuses on veteran-owned businesses, and they have to find a veteran-owned business to do business with. So it's a win-win program. So I'm going to be busy growing that business, hiring people. At the same time, I do a lot of volunteer work. I want to sit on more boards. I want more exposure because my journey is unique. I've been a military private, colonel, Army brat, Army wife, Army mom. My son is a Green Beret captain, and I'm very proud of him. He's easy to find on LinkedIn too. Just look for the other Glazer. I've been in a lot of people's shoes who support the military, and I am starting to get asked to speak to different forums. One I'm really proud of is Women in Law Enforcement for a very large county in Virginia. It's exciting to me that I've had so many experiences that I can tailor what I talk about to the audience. I've been resilient all my life. I was depressed, couldn't find a job, applied for prison guard, and I was not hired. So I have been in a lot of places. My life hasn't been charmed. I've had terrible setbacks. I've had a boss that told me I was incompetent. It's in the book. I've had other bosses threatened by my exuberant personality. And so I'd be kept in back offices where nobody would meet me because I was more likable than the boss was. And they didn't like the steady flow of traffic, people wanting to see me. It's just little microaggressions that I've overcome. There have been as many sorrows as joys, and my next 5 years are going to be all about joys, all about connecting with people, all about getting my word out, writing another book, being on many podcasts like this one. And Cheryl, you are only my second or third, so you'll have to let me know how I did.
I knew when I spoke to you on the phone originally that you would be a fantastic guest. When I met you, I just knew that I had a great woman who is doing great business, is including other people, and wants to give back. And that's a story that a lot of people need to hear. So for those of you listening, if you do have a podcast, if you have an opportunity for Irene to stand on your stage and present to your staff or your people, or if you just want to connect with her, I really recommend that you use the resources that are given to you through this podcast to make connections in a greater way. Any last alibis, Irene, before we close up your segment?
Absolutely, Cheryl. First of all, I don't take compliments well, so I'm just going to throw it back at you for being a great woman. So thank you for that, and thank you for all you do. The last thing I'll say to my audience is if you can wake up every morning and be grateful that you woke up, be grateful for the people that love you, be grateful for the day, you will find yourself in a better place than if you jump on TikTok when you roll out of bed or Instagram or whatever platform you use. Just clear your mind and give thanks. It's a great way to start the day. And that's all I have. But it was a real honor, privilege, and joy to speak with you, Cheryl. I hope we have a very long-standing relationship.
I think this is the beginning of a great friendship. Thank you so much. And my name is Cheryl Cross. We're going to wrap up this segment and this episode. We'll be right back. This is the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. We'll see you in a second.